So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this session today. My name is Gemma Williams. I'm one of the client service managers here at ukactive and have the pleasure of facilitating this session today. Firstly, we really appreciate that this is a busy time for many of you as you prepare to reopen your facilities again next week. So we really do appreciate you taking the time out this afternoon to join us for this webinar. The session today, we're going to be discussing the initial, following an initial consultation, we're going to be discussing the key findings of the future of the public leisure sector. And it's set to be a really interesting and insightful session today. But before we kick off, I just want to go through a few housekeeping things. The first being the session is being recorded today. The second, if the session does get cut off or you get cut off for any reason, please do use your original link to dial back in that you would have used a few moments ago. And finally, we do have time for questions at the end. So any questions that you do have throughout the session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to input and send those through to us. We will aim to get through as many of those as we can at the end of the session, but for those that we don't manage to answer live today, we will get back to you individually on those. So into the fun part of the session, and it is my pleasure to introduce Marianne Boyle, who is the Head of Infrastructure here at ukactive, who's going to be taking you through the content from today.
Well, thank you very much, Gemma. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the consultation that we undertook here at ukactive. In September and October this year, we had one-to-one interviews with a cross-section of our membership base. The members consulted with those specifically providing public sector leisure provision across the 4 nations via multiple operating models. And those operating models included in-house management, social enterprises, charitable trusts, management companies, and community interest companies. If you can come up with any other operating models, I'd be pleased to know. But I think we pretty much covered the breadth of what is operating out there within the public sector leisure sphere. The consultation was really an opportunity for ukactive to engage directly with our membership base, purely for the purpose of gathering insight from a leisure delivery provider perspective on the perceived challenges and opportunities in the delivery of public sector leisure. It should be noted, as we start out on this, that some of the findings within this presentation may not necessarily fully reflect everyone joining us today's experiences, but it is a summary of the key themes and findings from the interviews that we held. It's hoped that this insight will help to inform a wider piece of work with other agencies and key stakeholders, local authorities, various sport bodies, etc., in order for us to all collectively take forward the transformation for public sector leisure. An overview paper and a series of questions were provided to all interviewees in advance of the sessions, and they covered the following areas: current and future models, facilities and operation management, workforce, collaboration and partnerships, and demonstrating impact. As we move through the presentation, we'll start off by looking at purpose and vision for public sector leisure, or the perceived purpose and vision for public sector leisure. We'll then move on to challenges, and look at opportunities. The challenges are focused around the key lines of inquiries that I just mentioned, and we'll cover them one by one. So, purpose and vision. As you can see from the word cloud in front of you, there was a huge array of words and language and terminology that was used to describe the purpose of public sector leisure. But the majority of respondents did have similar views on the purpose. There really was no one phrase that was repeated on more than one occasion that really summed up what the purpose of public sector leisure is. Upon analysis of the multiple interviews that were held, a fair and accurate description of the majority of responses to the purpose is the delivery of social, economic and health outcomes on both a local and national level, whilst also providing affordable, accessible services and facilities to local communities. It's worth adding at this point that during the discussion regarding purpose and vision, it was really evident that there was a sense that providers feel that public sector leisure has on the whole lost its way, as the landscape it operates in has shifted and new challenges have emerged. The approach to the delivery of public sector leisure has diversified dramatically, resulting in a fragmented, confusing sector with crucially a lack of strategic vision and direction. It should also be noted that some respondents felt that whilst they knew and believed in the genuine purpose of the sector, that real need to focus on income generation meant that they were increasingly unable to live or breathe that purpose. With regard to vision, there was real alignment from the majority of respondents here, and in particular, a real passion and belief amongst all of the key role that public sector leisure can and in fact does play in contributing towards the wellness of the nation. Descriptors used by respondents included essential, a thriving sector, joined up and integral to health, delivered in partnership with local authority clients, valued, invested and strategically delivered at both a national and local level, and no longer seen as an income generator or purely an income generator, but also as an asset to really drive health outcomes and reduce inequalities. This is really significant because despite the differing operating models that I mentioned from the outset, each of the providers really felt there was an overwhelming agreement of the direction the sector needs to go in with regard to its vision. Moving on to challenges. There is a significant focus within this presentation on the challenges for public sector leisure, but the feeling was that that's the point of what we're trying to do here. It's really imperative that in order for us to move forward, there must be the ability to really look back, reflect on where the sector as a whole has come from, and to learn from the failures and the challenges that are really inhibiting progression and the ability to truly transform. We'll start off by looking at current and future models. Time and time again, the word race to the bottom was cited by respondents. That competitive procurement process that's used for many, not all, but for many local authority leisure contracts was really deemed as becoming unsustainable. Many agreed that such a competitive approach for contracting did once have its place, and in some respects, so it still does. It ensures local authorities really do get value for money for their assets. And there was once the ability of using this approach to really make sure that that commercial income cross-subsidised other targeted activity. However, over the last decade, external factors impacting both local authorities and providers, including but not limited to austerity, a competitive overcrowded market. Oh, apologies. Not sure what's happened there to the slides. A competitive overcrowded market, deteriorating facilities, coupled with that declining profit margin, has really seen public sector leisure becoming ever more commercialised, with providers expressing an inability to really focus that time, energy and resource into targeted activities or interventions. There was also strong belief amongst respondents that local authorities are really keen to set out on that procurement journey with the right intentions of looking for that leisure delivery provider with whom they would have a strategic relationship of shared goals and risks, working in partnership to lower costs, increase quality, drive innovation, and importantly, to deliver them real tangible outcomes for the local community. However, as contract negotiations begin, it was felt that there begins to be a default to an adversarial mindset, and in many cases, more of a transactional contracting approach. The perception is that this is driven mainly by the significant financial challenges that local authorities are under, following decade-long central government budget reductions, really creating a need for them to make the most out of their leisure assets from a financial perspective, with very little weight or value being given to the real social impact. Respondents described contracts as being overspecified and heavily managed, really requiring the leisure delivery provider to focus on onerous requirements that waste resources and force them to work in a more restrictive way. The way a contract is negotiated and managed has a real significant impact on the partnership going forward. Any fostering of negative behaviours from the outset really does undermine the relationship and the contract itself, and inevitably leads to a complete lack of trust and confidence for both parties. Despite the significant shift in landscape over recent years and the additional pressures this has created, By continually competing to win such unsustainable contracts, leisure delivery providers acknowledged that they were effectively enablers of this proverbial race to the bottom. There was a consensus too that providers have not played their part in really garnering the trust of the local authority client, and that in some cases the current lack of transparency and open book approach that was taken was significantly damaging to both existing and any future relationships between provider and client. A further recurrent theme was the emergence of full risk transfer to leisure delivery providers. Again, while it can have its place and can be very successful, with an abundance of aging facilities and risk that is not properly modelled, the result is often little or no investment and further deteriorating facilities that impact significantly on quality and services. Unfortunately, again, owing to them significant cuts to local government, the last decade has seen the level of leisure expertise within local authorities reduced dramatically. This not only leads to a lack of understanding of the complexities within the delivery of public sector leisure, impacting on the relationship with a provider, but it's resulted in an increase in the use of leisure consultants in supporting the leisure procurement process. Many leisure consultants are recruited by local authorities for their great ability and great successes in saving councils millions through identifying cost savings and efficiencies within leisure contracts. Under such financial pressures, this is a hugely attractive option for local authorities. And whilst there is no doubt consultants are an extremely valuable asset providing essential support to local authorities, utilising their skill set in this way has also contributed to that race to the bottom culture. Short-termism was a phrase that was used on multiple occasions throughout the interviews, the continued focus on short-term results at the expense of long-term interests that have real lasting impact. Those respondents that had longer-term contracts or partnership agreements cited the ability to really invest in people, resources and facilities, enabling them to create impact on a local level, unlike those who were awarded shorter-term contracts. The issue of local authorities perhaps being more risk adverse and a pursuit to re-tender, even when there's no legal obligation to do so, more related to the financials and the need to get the most out of the asset rather than how the facility is performing. The short-term nature of the political cycle, both locally and nationally, further contributes to uncertainty and the ability to be able to plan long-term. And the financial challenges local authorities are under really creates a need to own leisure facilities that are cost neutral or create a surplus. This takes money out of the system and back into the local authority. But ultimately, that money that should be going into the system is the money that provides them real targeted activities. Some additional challenges to note that were raised was the current external perception of public sector leisure as a whole, and how this is extremely damaging to the credibility of what is actually provided and significantly undervalues the community benefit that's provided. The way public sector leisure has been referred to throughout the pandemic has really shone a light on the lack of understanding and value associated with the sector, referred to by central government as part and parcel of hospitality and leisure industry. And the media's constant use of the term gyms creates a specific image and is misrepresentative of what public sector leisure and indeed leisure sector actually is and does. It was noted though that, as previously raised, if public sector leisure has lost its way and itself cannot articulate clearly its true purpose, there can be little expectation of government or indeed the media and general public to really grasp the true meaning and value of public sector leisure. Move on to facilities and operation management. One of the first questions within this section was around the current standards and codes of practice that are available. Respondents did feel that the current standards and codes of practice had their place and had been extremely beneficial, but that there was a need for them to be updated. Some were referred to as a nice to have, with respondents stating they were a good team building exercise. Respondents were of the view that the current standards need to evolve further than they already have, and that there's a need for a standard that really reflects the new landscape for public sector leisure. Crucial to this was a standard that can really reflect outcomes, particularly linked to health, that is based on customer-led insight and that can actually influence consumer behaviour. In terms of facilities, it's been long recognised that there are significant challenges with regard to public sector leisure facilities. Much of the stock of leisure buildings is from an earlier era, and if not decaying, certainly energy inefficient and restricted. There's a real need for urgent investment, and this was reflected in the discussion with respondents. Leisure's dropped significantly down the rankings of priority for local authorities as they have to prioritise spending resulting in a significant reduction in the amount of capital funding for leisure facilities. This lack of capital investment is further impacted by limited opportunities for external capital funding for leisure infrastructure. These ageing facilities and lack of investment are not only a concern in terms of life cycle of a facility, but also represent a significant challenge with regard to accessibility. There have been significant leaps made with new leisure facility design, but more needs to be done to really address the needs of the local community. And as one respondent said, not just ticking boxes in terms of legislation or legal requirements. An additional burden to add to the management of facilities is the impact that COVID is and will have going forward. Remodelling will be required to ensure safe distances are kept. Capacity will have to be limited. There are indications that facilities that have seen the biggest return of customers following lockdown are those that have had the most significant investment in recent years. The older, more tired facilities that were already in need of investment are going to be severely impacted as a result of COVID, with little or no modifications able to be undertaken, either as a result of their age or cultural significance. Many will not be able to open because they physically cannot meet the new guidelines, or they are able to open, but are seeing a low return of customers because of perceived safety and cleanliness. There also came across that there appears to be a legacy of leisure facilities built 40 or more years ago with a specific facility mix. These leisure facilities, it was felt, have not evolved in the same way the local community has and no longer reflect the needs of the place in which they are located. Ultimately, respondents felt that any decision to rationalise, close underperforming facilities or invest is not done strategically enough and is too often politically motivated. With regard to swimming and wetside facilities, on the whole, we know they run at significant loss, a cost largely offset by swimming lessons and health and fitness provision. But this is steadily becoming a less viable approach. However, swimming pools are a hugely beneficial and valuable commodity to both society and public sector leisure. To make these essential facilities even more viable, it was felt that there needs to be more flexibility within the timetabling. Facilities are often handed over to providers with explicit programming requirements. With flexibility, leisure delivery providers feel that they can maximise the use of space in a much more efficient and effective way, but there is a real reluctance for this change in programming. Swimming clubs are an extremely important partner of leisure delivery providers. However, there is a legacy of clubs operating as businesses and providing swimming lessons in direct competition with leisure delivery providers. A solution to this needs to exist so that both can coexist. And finally, there's an extremely limited recognition or understanding of the real cost of swimming amongst the public. In many cases, it's 50% cheaper than going to the cinema, yet as an activity, it has a really poorly perceived value. In terms of climate, the leisure industry is, as we know, a significant consumer of energy in the UK. And as it stands, many respondents felt that public sector leisure is at risk of falling behind in its attempts to reduce net carbon emissions, which could in the long term be reputationally damaging to the sector. Unfortunately, respondents cited how current regulations that centres need to follow in order to be COVID secure is not supportive of the green agenda, but instead is increasing the sector's footprint and driving energy costs up further. A large portion of respondents felt that they and their local authority clients need support from both an educational but also a financial perspective in navigating and understanding the significant emerging market of products and technology that is available to help the sector to really reduce emissions and be more energy efficient. And finally, as a big consumer of energy, it comes as no surprise that energy expenditure is and will remain a significant challenge for the sector. It has a huge impact on the bottom line and is only a cost that is only going to increase as a result of COVID. In terms of workforce and the challenges, a significant area of concern amongst most respondents was with regard to recruitment and retention of staff. Staffing is one of the biggest costs to leisure delivery providers, often as much as 60% of their outgoings. When savings unfortunately need to be made, which is becoming an increasingly regular occurrence, the first line is normally salary reductions or redundancies, resulting in lower paid roles with increased responsibilities. Whilst welcome, there is genuine concern around the impact the rise in the national living wage and the national minimum wage is going to have on operating models going forward. Leisure delivery providers operate on razor-tight margins with an inability to pass these costs onto the customer through increased prices. And as such, are an industry that will really feel the impact of these measures more than most, with significant organisational decisions having to be made. In terms of leadership, for senior leaders within the sector, many stated that the management structure isn't as good as it could be. There are no clear progression routes. In comparison to other industries, this lacks a real credibility associated with employment and leisure. Many respondents also cited the quality or experience of existing leadership within the sector as maybe lacking some of the essential skills needed to really drive the sector forward. With no clear development plan, employees often progress into more senior roles, having been developed as task-orientated leaders, a leadership style that more than suits the day-to-day business operations, but that really stifles groundbreaking or creative approaches to work. In terms of workforce, stagnant was a word used to describe where we are at present. As an example, digitisation is a huge market, yet despite making extensive progress on the digital offer in recent months, public sector leisure is still years behind. Lack of credibility and a low wage economy again contribute to the inability to really attract experienced professionals from other fields that would be able to really drive transformational change in the delivery of products and services. As a sector, some respondents felt that we are quite often too inward facing with regard to learning and development, and recognition that leisure do not always have all the answers, and there's a fantastic opportunity to learn a significant amount from other more advanced industries. Too often it was felt that the time really is not taken to stop and consider what skills will be required to be developed of the workforce, and how we're failing to move the industry forward by not adequately developing and recruiting the staff that can effectively deliver the vision for public sector leisure. And finally, the workforce demographics. From board level to frontline consumer-facing employees, the staff in public sector leisure, it was felt, do not on the whole reflect the communities we seek to serve. There is a recognition that we need to get better at representation in a bid to develop services that are truly inclusive and accessible. Essential, crucial, and core. These were the recurrent words used with the discussion on partnerships and collaboration. An overwhelming appreciation of how fundamental this area is to the success and delivery of effective public sector leisure provision. However, despite there being some great examples of partnership working, again, there were significant challenges that emerged, which are detrimental to the overall impact public sector leisure can have. It was felt that there's often a lack of capacity within local authority and the leisure delivery provider to really take the time to work together, let alone to provide the focus, time and energy required to develop other external partnerships. Many discussions focused on the lack of a strategic and formal approach to partnerships from both a national and local perspective. More needs to be done at a national level to really engage key partners, including health and education, in dialogue to ensure that we're strategic in our approach to public sector leisure and able to utilise the assets that leisure has to support their priorities. Overall, the feeling was that multiple opportunities are missed or lost to create partnerships or collaborate with others. The view was that leisure delivery providers' approach is very internal facing and there's limited creativity beyond the obvious opportunities. In terms of impact, 98% of respondents agreed that the sector makes a substantial contribution to UK society and that being able to demonstrate social value is of significant importance. Despite this, evidencing social value was not an integral part of many contracts or an expectation of the client. The social value agenda has been held back by weaknesses. It's being seen as a nice to have, especially against the backdrop of austerity and an inconsistent approach to both its interpretation and its evaluation. Leisure delivery providers must be in a position to confidently use social value, respond to challenges in its validity, and really bring it to life at a local level. As one respondent said, link the rhetoric to reality. How does it translate on the ground and benefit local economies and communities? Moving on to inclusion and accessibility. When discussing this, the sector as a whole, with particular regard to ethnically diverse communities, disability, LGBTQI+, and women and girls, over 60% of respondents stated that their personal feeling was, we can do more. Strongly came across from at least 95% of respondents that there is a real ambition amongst the sector to be better and do more to provide targeted activities and support specific groups. Whilst there's recognition that the sector themselves or the providers themselves can do a lot more, there were also challenges that were recognised that hindered the ability to do this. These included linking back to the lack of partnerships, the real drive to increase commercial revenue and to deliver operationally on more over-specified contracts that hindered the capacity and ability to deliver targeted activities and programmes. It was felt that the continued inclusion of concessionary prices within contracts was too much of a blanket approach and was not targeted enough to those who really need it most. There was a feeling that they actually achieve very little and in some ways negatively impact on the ability for public sector leisure as a whole to really tackle health inequalities. In order to have real tangible impact and engage specific groups within a community, a much more refined and targeted partnership approach is needed to actively support and engage specific groups within communities local to that facility. As previously mentioned, the leisure workforce is on the whole not reflective of the groups. More needs to be done to recruit from a workforce that reflects our diverse society and encourages more diversity of thought in how public leisure sector approach and deliver services. You'll be pleased to know we are now going to move away from challenges and look at some of the opportunities that were identified for public sector leisure. There was a huge sense from all respondents that now more than ever is the time to coalesce and start working towards transforming public sector leisure. Despite being catastrophic to much of the sector, COVID has presented an opportunity to really drive home the message that leisure is and should be essential, and that the services provided by public leisure are crucial in supporting the health service with both protection and prevention. The term essential was used as there were differing opinions on the value of being a statutory service. Whilst it undeniably would be a welcome move, there was a sense of caution in placing too much emphasis on this as being the silver bullet, as one respondent commented. Another respondent also said, a comprehensive and efficient library provision is a statutory responsibility, yet libraries are still at constant threat of closure and significant cutbacks. Focusing on statutory status also potentially deflects from the true transformation that is needed for the sector. The view was that we must, however, continue to lobby for the public sector to be seen as essential. We've made significant inroads with this in recent weeks alone, this week alone, with the inclusion of all tiers, gyms being open within all tiers. However, we need to continue to drive this forward. Leisure needs to be seen as essential, and we need to use the momentum that's been created by COVID to drive that agenda. Time and time again throughout the discussions regarding challenges, it was evident that the lack of a robust national strategy or blueprint for public sector leisure was hugely detrimental in the ability for the sector to move forward collectively and truly identify itself as the wellness arm of the NHS. There is a need for a national strategy that clearly outlines the purpose and vision for public sector leisure, alongside a detailed framework for how this actually translates on a local level to really support the delivery of a local place-based priorities. So much more needs to be done to engage more proactively between leisure delivery providers, the local authority clients, and also wider community partners, but also health and education sectors. We need to ensure that wherever possible, agendas are aligned and the sector's role in reducing health inequalities and securing the physical and mental health of the nation is explicit and understood. As one respondent quite rightly said, we must stop trying to shoehorn leisure in, but work with the key agencies to ensure there is a well-defined and strategic role for us going forward. What is clear from the challenges is that the current contracting model and management of contracts has a significantly detrimental knock-on impact on the workforce, partnerships and relationships, and crucially, the provider's perceived ability to deliver services that seek to address local health inequalities. There is a need to really try and instigate a movement away from what we've referred to here as a transactional contracting approach. If we can move towards a more formal relational contract, much like the partnership agreements that exist, it would have a significant impact on the delivery of public sector leisure. Much more partnership driven in its approach, this would encourage the development of shared objectives and goals, encouraging trust and collaboration whilst establishing governance structures that manage expectations and keep interests aligned over the long term. Whilst the majority of respondents want to act straight away in terms of being more open book and transparent with regard to their contracts, this type of contracting model would enable that. It would also provide the agility and flexibility to adjust pricing and programming to really enable leisure delivery providers to react in a timely manner to external pressures on the business and operating model. In terms of facilities, it was felt that there's a need for a more strategic approach to leisure facilities on the whole. A national leisure infrastructure strategy was touted that really supports investment, rationalisation and consolidation, really influencing a new way of thinking with regard to leisure facility assets across the UK, driven at a national level and not politically motivated on a local level. Many respondents felt that we need to be more consistent in the interpretation and use of evidence, allowing the sector to communicate accurate and robust data on a national and local level. It was suggested that the development of 3 or 4 indicators aligned specifically to health would be something the whole sector can get behind and be a step in the right direction in demonstrating real value. There was a need for the implementation of a sector standard that will really drive continuous service improvements as well as specific outcomes that will ensure the sector is accountable, utilise customer-led insight and, quite importantly, provide that much needed credibility amongst strategic partners, health and education included. Many felt there was not just an opportunity, but a need for greater consistency from all within public sector leisure with regard to image. A sector-wide commitment to work collectively on targeted campaigns, use appropriate language and terminology that truly demonstrates the community benefit, and use imagery that is reflective of both our existing members and those that we want to engage with. And workforce. There was a feeling that we need to be more strategic in the long-term development of the workforce, and as such, a long-term workforce development plan was touted. This will enhance the sector's credibility as an employer, supporting recruitment from a wider pool of experts and ensure that the existing leisure workforce at all levels continues to be equipped with the skills needed to really deliver on the purpose and vision for public sector leisure. A further point to add with regard to opportunity was collaboration and the chance to be truly a united sector. The pandemic has created a common purpose and cause that has united everyone within public sector leisure, and in a way has taken everyone out of their silos and enforced collaboration that was not there before. This was cited with regard to relationships between the multiple leisure delivery providers, public and private sector, the joint working of the multiple national agencies, and the relationship between the provider and the client. Together, public sector leisure is stronger, and as things eventually begin to settle, it's crucial that the sector does not go back to its silos, but continues to build on the common ground created for the good. Finally, there is no denying that the challenges that we've identified here are abundant, but so are the opportunities for public sector leisure. Services in some ways are not being delivered as they were originally intended. Large swathes of communities who should be utilising and accessing public leisure facilities are not. But it's only until the very real and distinct challenges are addressed that we can truly say that public leisure sector does what it says on the tin. This is by no means a final word of how public sector leisure should change going forward. Our intention at ukactive is to start a conversation with our members who are just one piece of a very, very large puzzle. There needs to be a collective call to action, further consultation with all of the other key stakeholders, and a commitment to really work together to change public leisure sector for the better. Before I wrap up, I just want to draw your attention to this quote. This was made in a parliamentary session in 1937 at the introduction of the Physical Training and Recreation Act. In the same year, in his first political broadcast since becoming Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain announced a great national campaign to bring home the need for physical fitness. At the time these statements were made, many other issues pressed on government. Recovery from depression, mass unemployment, malnutrition, poverty, not forgetting the constitutional crisis as a result of Edward VIII's abdication, and of course, German rearmament and aggression that was a threat to peace and stability. Yet despite all of that, the importance of physical fitness to the nation was elevated to a position of considerable prominence by both the King and the Prime Minister. Whilst the societal and economic challenges we face now are significant, history has shown us that public leisure has a significant part to play in supporting the nation all the time, but especially during difficult times. We must continue to garner our collective passion and belief in the sector to really drive home the message that we are crucial to the wellness of the nation. Thank you all very much. That is the end of my presentation. So I will stop share there and hopefully we'll have had lots of questions.
No, brilliant. That was that was really, really insightful. I think something that resonated with me as a word that was mentioned multiple times was essential. And I think that's absolutely true, that public leisure provision is essential. And I think whilst there are a vast array of challenges across the sector and public leisure provision, I think the opportunities are there, and it's really, really interesting to start to unpick this and see how that can unfold and develop in the future. So we've got some time now for questions with yourself, Marianne. So we've had a few through already, but at this point, just to highlight, if anybody does have any questions, please use the Q&A box or function at the bottom of your screen and pose those over the next few minutes. As I said, we have had a few in already, but I suppose I just wanted to start off with one from myself. You mentioned that this is one piece of the puzzle. So what are the proposed next steps for this, for how this is, I suppose, how this is going to be taken forward?
A good question, Jem. I have to say it would be completely naive and arrogant of us to believe that this consultation provides all the answers and is the way forward. As you've just said there, this is one piece of the puzzle. And there really will be differing opinions of the challenges to public sector leisure. But what was important for us to do with this piece of work was to really pull out the themes that resonated most with our members. The next step for taking this forward, we are hoping to establish a round table with them real key agencies engaged in public sector leisure to talk about what we've found, but also their thoughts on going forward, and hopefully to expand the consultation. You know, it's one side of the coin. We need to find out what the other challenges are, and we need to pull it all together and look at how we collectively take this forward. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to crack on to some of the questions that we've had through so far. So this one has come through from an anonymous person, and they've said that it's refreshing to hear that providers were able to honestly review their own actions that have led to the current landscape for public sector leisure. How serious do you think the providers you interviewed are about instigating change?
Okay, I suppose we set out from the outset with the consultation, we set out that this was Chatham House rules. We really wanted honest and critical thought from the interviewees. So we laid that out from the very beginning, that this was the opportunity to really get under the skin of what the challenges were and where they saw the opportunities. We also set the tone that this isn't a blame game. This isn't about pointing fingers. It isn't about saying it's one organisation or one person's fault. This is about the bigger picture and how we all need to pull it together to work together to transform public sector leisure. And I think that really enabled the providers that were interviewed the opportunity to take a step back and reflect on their actions over the years, as well as the actions of others, and how that has impacted on the bigger picture and where we are now. And I genuinely think that the people that I interviewed are serious about taking public sector leisure forward, are serious about their passion and their belief. That really, really resonated through the interviews. And I think that's quality, that's the best thing about doing qualitative interviews, is that you really do get a feel for how genuine somebody is. And it was genuine. You know, there is a real need for change, and they're passionate about that change and want to go on that journey. So I think they realise that at the moment, the way things stand and with the additional pressures and challenges of COVID, the current situation is no longer viable, and we really need to start driving things forward.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So the next question that we've got here, there are some great examples of public sector leisure working in partnerships and delivering fantastic outcomes for health and education, but are not mentioned. Are there any plans to look for case studies that demonstrate how these things could be delivered?
Okay, that's a great question. In a way, I'm quite glad that someone's asked that, because I suppose firstly, the purpose of this consultation was really, as I said, to get under the skin of leisure delivery providers and really understand where they specifically see the challenges and opportunities for public sector leisure. And we did focus the conversation on them areas, that the kind of key lines of inquiries were specifically around the challenges. I think you're 100% right to raise this question. In many ways, the sector does continually get a bad rap, particularly through certain outlets, for maybe not providing enough for local communities and those that need it most. However, I think the recent report that's come out, Liverpool John Moores, it demonstrates exactly that evidence is there already. 66% of all prehab and rehab for cancer takes place within a leisure facility setting. That is an outstanding figure. That is huge. And it really shows just how crucial the sector is to health. And also shows that as a sector, this figure has been achieved despite the multiple challenges that we've raised throughout this presentation. Imagine if the sector were able to address even more of the challenges that we've identified, how much more could be done to really support health outcomes if we can address the existing challenges that stop the sector from being able to deliver as we want it to. I would as well add, sorry, Jem, there was a mention at the end there about case studies, and I would say, yeah, I think that and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we know the breadth and the detail enough across the board. And when I say we, I mean the royal we, everybody, of what actually happens within a leisure centre, then real targeted activities, the things that go on. I think the figure of 66% maybe took some by surprise, maybe not others, but we really need to get under the skin of them good case studies and the things that are going on within the sector so that we can shout about them. It's too sparse at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So we'll move on to the next one. This one's come through from Kate Atwater, and she says, have any early discussions started on this work with key decision makers in terms of getting public leisure placed and accepted where it needs to be? Can they help us getting the leisure sector taken seriously?
Hi, Kate. Hope you're okay. I think we have had discussions. So we've had meetings. Sport England are a key partner in this, as we've met with Sport Scotland, who are already doing some fantastic work to address some of the issues here, as are other partners and providers like SIMSPA. And actually, some of the work here, I think, does kind of undercut some things that are already happening behind the scenes, which is great because some of the challenges that have been raised are already starting to be addressed. And that's very early stages. Partners with Community Leisure UK, so they too, alongside this, did the workshops with the trusts, the charitable trusts, and a lot we used their findings as well, and a lot of that reflected the discussions that we had with the multiple operating models our side too. So we feel like it does give that real big picture, and collectively we now need to work to take that forward. So it's very, very early stage discussions about how we do this that needs to culminate into more of a round table call for action.
Brilliant. We've had another one come through from another anonymous attendee. And this says, what were the top 3 things that you heard through the interviews that you immediately thought were things we should take forward?
That's a good one. That's
yeah,
just a bit. I always worry when it's an anonymous question as well. The top 3 things, I think it's, as can be seen, the one thing that I would say is not every leisure delivery provider that was interviewed has a management contract or a contractual relationship. It's very different across the board. So it was very difficult to kind of pull together that general consensus, but you really got the feeling that current existing contractual arrangements do really have an impact that filters all the way down through what can be delivered and what can be achieved. So if that can be addressed from the outset, and we really truly can look at that from a social and an outcome perspective and more of a partnership perspective, I think it will have a huge impact on the delivery of services. I think when you speak to like some of the trusts that have partnership agreements, they really do have much better relationships with the local authority client. And the delivery side of it, they're much more able to deliver locally. So I think they're just that contractual side of thing for me is number one. The second side was around inclusion and accessibility, and I think there's for me it just highlights the need around facilities and accessibility of facilities, and that's not just in terms of your, like it said in the report, legal and legislative requirements. It goes over and above that, and it goes over looking at how your facility really does engage and support people within that local community to access it. The real small things that none of us may think about on a daily basis, but that made a huge impact and really create a barrier for some people. people to accessing a leisure facility. And then the other side of that inclusive and accessibility side is that piece around the workforce and the demographics, and how the local workforce needs to really reflect the local community, right from a local level, but also from a more senior level, in terms of that diversity of thought. And maybe we're lacking that diversity of thought because of the lack of diversity within the workforce at a higher level. That's only 2. I think that's 3 or 4 actually, so I'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll let you off on that one. And we've got the final question in, so if anybody does have any further questions, please do pop them in the Q&A function now. So the last one that we've had through so far is: workforce was identified as an area that represented significant challenges in moving public sector leisure forward. Will you be engaging with partners like CIMSPA on this element?
Yeah, a great question. And again, the difficulty about providing a presentation like this is you have to be quite concise, and you can't go into a lot of the detail. But what I would like to say around the workforce is the workforce existing is hugely valued, and the expertise and the fantastic work that the workforce, what was identified in the challenges, does not belittle that, does not belittle the fantastic work that strategic partner of ours, CIMSPA, are doing, and how crucial the work that they are is. It's just identifying other additional challenges. We will share that with CIMSPA, who, as I said, are a strategic partner of ours and a crucial stakeholder within public sector leisure puzzle, and hopefully it will support the work that they're doing. I mean, what I would say is hopefully the findings in this consultation will actually complement the strategic direction that some are already taking. Like I said, some are already starting this work, and it's happening behind the scenes, because some of this that's been presented today will not be new to some of you. It's been talked about. This has just been our opportunity to really pull it together from a strategic perspective, put it all in one place, and then look at how we're going to take it forward. So yeah, and in fact, I know that from discussion with colleagues that things around workforce and development are already being taken forward and worked on, and hopefully that will help to alleviate some of the challenges identified already, which is positive. It shows there's things in action.
Brilliant, perfect. So we haven't had any other questions through at the moment, so that is all of the questions. You're off the hook. I think, I mean, from my perspective, it's what a insightful, fantastic session. So much information to digest, but really positive, and lots of opportunities and lots to take forward from this. And I think for me, listening to the presentation there, there's a lot of challenges, yes, but actually there's a lot of opportunities, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the public leisure sector and provision adapts, changes, and grows in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I think I would just like to add just a thanks to our members that engaged in this process, and to the members of Community Leisure UK who contributed to the workshops that they delivered, which also informed part of the work that we're doing here. So I would like to thank them for taking the time and for being so honest and critical. And that criticism, you know, we talked about our role as well in terms of UK Active and what we need to be doing to support our members and supporting this transformation. And we've taken all of that on board, and we are looking at how we can work to support our members in the background too with that piece. So it was very insightful for me and very informing. So thank you to those that did contribute. Brilliant.
Well, thank you, Marianne. Thank you for joining us and teaching us some things. But again, thank you to everybody that has joined today and has taken the time out to listen to this webinar this afternoon. If you do have any further questions, we will send a follow-up email after the session thanking you with a direct email address to reach out to us. As always, anybody from the UK Active team is here to support, whether it's directly around content or anything in this webinar, or whether it is around supporting you with reopening your facilities over the coming week. Once again, thank you for joining. Thank you, Marianne, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jem.